Welcome to Global Affairs Network. I'm your host, Malik Linzanzo. Tonight is a great conversation with one of my best friends here in the DMV area. To be connected to the place where you were, where your story started, uh, from a region uh, to a living relatives, to discover more complete story of you. For some African American, DNA test offer some answers beyond the world of slavery. So what we're going to do today is to bring one of my buddy, Mr. Paul Pumhrey. Welcome, my friend. How you been though?
Welcome, Malik. I'm happy to
Li-
be.
li- Hey, listen, it's a great pleasure. When you told me about your DNA results, I was so excited. I said, you know what, we need to put on the show because a lot of people, you're not the only person. A lot of people are not doing it because knowing that you're connected to a certain area, a specific area in Africa, and hopefully to some relatives that is are still living in Africa is a powerful statement, especially to our brothers and sisters in the diaspora here in the United States in particular. I know some other people in the Caribbean as well. Now, tell me your journey. How was
Well,
that experience?
on my father's side, our family came into the state of Maryland in 1624. And so I was curious as to what would be my DNA. So I actually went to ancestors, um, I'm sorry, African ancestors, and sent them a sample of my DNA and asked them if they could identify where I came from. And they sent me back a response that said that on my father's side, I was 100% taken from Gabon. And that
Now
really
you
kind of surprised you when I told it, when I shared that information with you.
now
That
you you
clearly
you
we are brothers.
you are aware that I'm from Gabon, and
Yes.
you and me will go back for years back, and for me to learn that, hey, listen, there's a reason why you love this brother. You actually, it's powerful, man. Let's listen. I was I'll let you continue the story. I get so excited, just to know that this is my cousin right there. Go ahead.
Well, one of the things is that I have had an interest in the continent for a number of years, and I've had the opportunity to travel to the continent. I have visited maybe 7 or 8 different countries in the continent, and many of them I've been there multiple times. But I have yet to have a chance to go home to Gabon. And so I'm probably going to have to hook up with you and have you introduce me to my home on
Definitely,
my side.
definitely, man. That. It will be a great
That's a
pleasure.
trip I'm looking forward to.
Listen, I'm looking for that trip as well. If my wife was here, she would tell you. We have a chance there for her. That was also the first time she didn't try the DNA yet. Yeah, but
Uh
she
huh.
uh she connected through marriage. Eventually, of course, our kids are Gabonese American, but
Hmm.
through marriage, she from Gabon. But I don't know if she, if by DNA, she be maybe a Nigerian or whatever stuff. But the fact of the matter is, she was able to go back home on the continent, on the continent, back home on the motherland, and the experience was amazing. I can
Yes.
tell you, it's nothing like that when you know this is where your story started, because through colonization and slavery, people will trying to tell you the story that your story started with slavery. It didn't start with slavery.
No.
So that
No.
is a
No.
very important step toward looking for who you are as a human being on this planet. You go ahead. I don't know
And,
if you bounce back on that.
well, the thing is that I think that realizing that, in fact, many of us are from different parts of the continent and the diaspora because we're either from Africa or we're from the Caribbean or we're from Central America or South America. It makes no difference. The point is that I feel that there was a purpose for me to be born here in this country. And there's a role that I need to play in actually evening up the development of those parts of the world, whether we talk about Africa, the Caribbean, Central America, or South America. Because, in fact, as we're going to talk a little later about a video that you're going to show, it shows how the countries of the North have deliberately used their power to undermine and keep underdeveloped the countries of the South. And that there's a clear strategy that we can go about in reversing that process. And so I look forward to talking to you about that strategy. And I think after people see this presentation on the video you're going to show that I shared with you a couple of days ago, that they will understand a little better how we can change the dynamics of the way over underdevelopment that we find, whether we're looking at the continent of Africa, whether we're looking at the Caribbean, whether we're looking at Central America or South America, or even, for that matter, even certain parts of Australia. We can really play an important role wherever we happen to be in this universe, on this earth, to reverse the process of the underdevelopment. And I was more than happy to be able to share some examples of how that can happen. So I would just say that I don't want to take too much time at this point, because I think that the presentation is going to be an important part, and then we can really begin to talk about what the presentation had to say, and we can begin to talk about how do we solve this problem.
Absolutely. Listen, I think you should know. Don't be worried, because when I have you on the show, people are listening. They know they have to come and listen, because there's a lot of knowledge and education that will come out of your mind. Talking about Gabon, you have your let me take you back on that, because we will get into the second piece about the strategies and all kind of stuff, the importance of you being born in America, and what can you do now that when you look back to those places that you were actually talking about. Now, with the magic of DNA, now they're telling you in some places in Africa, specifically in this region of Africa called Gabon, this country called Gabon. And if I'm not mistaken, it looks like specifically they say that you belong to this ethnic group called the Teke people. So
Yes.
now we can pinpoint exactly, because these are my neighbors actually, by the way, because I'm from the south as well. Um, so we can pinpoint exactly where you come from. Now, because you've been like your work, extensive work that you've been doing over the years, is always to look at the dynamics with the Western, how the relationship with that they have with those colonized countries. We came from slavery, then we have colonization, and then today with the neocolonialism, the exploitation is still ongoing. So you
Yes.
being from Gabon, do you have some ideas? I want to know if there's some ideas there that you already have in your mind in terms of what kind of maybe some projects, or maybe some stuff that you can maybe inspire, maybe teach, maybe start and work with some local people in order to eventually to help them out economically.
Yes. One of the first things one of the first things I would like to say is that most of us who the educational systems we grew up under, we were taught, in fact, how to not solve the problem. And so we have to really re-evaluate and re-educate ourselves as to what we really need to do to solve the problems, because most of the things we've been taught is just the opposite. It helps to perpetuate the madness that's going on today. And it keeps the nations in the North in an unfair advantage in being able to extract wealth throughout the South. What are we talking about? The continent of Africa, many parts of the Middle East, as well as the Caribbean, Central America, South America, and even parts of Asia. And so what we really have to do is to see through the miseducation we've been given and begin to then map out a strategy of how do we now reverse the hemorrhaging of the wealth from the southern nations flowing to the northern nations in Europe, in Canada, in the United States, as well as places like Australia. How do we really reverse that? And that's the thing that I think is going to be very important for us to discuss today, because I have found that, in fact, one of the things they want to get us to do is to think of the me, the I, rather than how do we, as a people, work together to bring about the real change. Because,
Collectively, yeah.
yes, collectively, we're going to have to work collectively to make this happen. And when we do, we will see dramatic changes happening and the dramatic amount of resources that actually we do right now possess, but have not been given the opportunity to process those resources in a way where we benefit from it. They usually tell us for us to give them the unrefined resources, and they buy that at a very low price, and then they tweak it a little bit and sell it back at a very high price. And that's what has to be addressed.
Absolutely.
If we do this in the right way, this could be a much better world, a world that's a lot more just. And so there's a real need of creating a partnership throughout the whole diaspora to make this happen. It cannot happen just in Africa. It has to happen with people of African descent who live in Europe, who live in the United States, who live in Australia, who live in Canada, and even in different parts of Central America and South America. It has to be a united effort, a united front. And when we are able to do that and actually understand the system and the process that has been used against us, and we reverse that process, we will then begin to see a very prosperous Africa, a very prosperous Caribbean, a very prosperous Central and South America. And that, in fact, we can actually even the score so that, in fact, you do not have the kind of unjust economic system that we now are presently forced to live under.
So
So,
when you mentioned the reverse of the process, and
yes,
there've been a lot of talk around the reparation issue. And
yes,
usually, when we talk about reparation, it's always we look at somebody in front of you to kind of repair the damages. But it seems to me, though, that when you talk about the process, this process, it looks like connecting the dots, just like you're starting to do, and many others. Do you think this is also another way of, repairing our own self?
well, let me explain what I see when we start talking about reparation. Basically, what we are talking about is a system in which the northern countries rob the southern countries and then give a small percentage of what they have robbed out of the southern countries as payment for reparations, as long as they can continue to be in a position to rob the southern countries. And that's what has to be reversed. We have to, in fact, look at how do we go about setting up a structure, a system that stops the hemorrhaging of the wealth out of the South to the North. I'll give you an example. If you look at Europe today and you look for natural resources, you can't find very much gold, copper, diamonds, iron, tin, cobalt, coltan. They virtually do not exist. What you will find maybe is coal, and because of its pollutant capabilities, most people are moving away from even using coal. So what we have to begin to say then, okay, then the real wealth in this world today still exists in the Southern Hemisphere. So if all we're asking for the Northern Hemisphere to do is to take the money that take a small percentage of the money that they're stealing out of the South and pay us back, but do not create the structure in which we can actually benefit from the resources in the South ourselves, we will stay right in the same situation we're in right now. And that's why it's very, very important that we understand that even more so important than reparation is how do we stop the hemorrhaging of the natural resources out of the South, flowing to the North, in which is multiplied many times as it's being processed, and then staying in the North and having the North turn around and loan us from the wealth that they have amassed, loan the South with interest. Money that's already there originated, the wealth really originated from the South in the first place. So we need to look at what do we need to do to stop the hemorrhaging of the wealth from the South. I mean, your neighboring country, the Congo, you estimate that it probably has about 20-some trillion dollars worth of minerals. But if the Congo processed its own minerals, processed its own gold, its coltan, its copper, its cobalt, its diamonds, its gold, that 20-some trillion dollars multiplies into hundreds of trillions of dollars. But if we're not going to process those natural resources ourselves, then what ends up happening is Europe, China, United States, Canada, Australia extracts those natural resources, process them, multiply the value, and then turn around and give a fraction of it back to the southern states. And that's what has to stop. That's what has to be where we, in fact, reverse that process so that we will have the resources to rebuild the continent.
Absolutely.
America, South America, the Caribbean, and even parts of Asia. And so to talk about reparations, it's like a Band-Aid on an amputated leg. It's still not going to help you to walk. It may stop you from bleeding, but it's not going to put you in a position where you can stand on your 2 feet again. So we need to really look at how do we go about, what process we need to go through to make sure that that amputated leg is replaced so that we can stand on our 2 feet again. And when we understand that process and understand there's a role for people in Africa, in the Caribbean, in Central America to play, in Asia to play, but it's also a very important role for those of us who live in the diaspora that we have an important role to play as well. And if we do work together, we can actually replace that amputated leg with a very functional leg where we can run the race and actually win. So that's my proposal of what we can talk about today.
Absolutely. Listen. You know. So what we're gonna do is give you just a few minutes to breathe. I'm gonna play some commercial for this break, and then we'll come back. We're gonna eventually play that video, and that will give us more ammunition to break down whatever you were saying. So I will be back in a second.
Thank you.
We are back here with my friend Paul Pumhrey, a humanitarian activist. This guy's been working and defending and advocating people of Africa for a long time. I cannot even tell you how many times I've seen you on the streets, fighting. And it's so good that now we can pinpoint when you were fighting for the people with your group, the friend of Congo, and come to realize you're actually from the same region. Because if that was not for that conference in I think somewhere in Berlin or in Europe where they divided Africa, you probably will be a Congolese versus Gabonese. So that is actually your land. It makes sense. So the calling of your spirit and intellect it makes sense all of a sudden. So before we went on a break, I was talking about that video that come to really put a nail on the coffin. You already you were actually putting down the knowledge about what is coming next. So without further ado, I'm gonna play that video, and then we will come back and then kind of dissect what's going on here. Yeah.
Truthful and unapologetic.
What this presentation is fundamentally designed to say is this. Africa, historically, sub-Saharan Africa, has been fundamental to the global prosperity of the advanced countries. Okay? And Africa had a role to play. It has a role as a raw material producer. We will not allow sub-Saharan Africa to escape that. Okay, we do everything to keep sub-Saharan Africa where it is, also impoverished. It's absolutely vital for the prosperity of everyone else. So let's get clear about that. Okay, and this means all the economic structures, all the global institutions, and the economics we teach everyone is all designed to keep Africa exactly where it is. And whether it is Europe or US or now China, it's always the same. We need Africa to be impoverished because we need those raw materials and we need them dirt cheap. Okay, so that's the message. It doesn't mean to say that there's nothing Africans can do. Of course there is. Okay, but this is the opposition that they're fighting. This is what it's about. Because if Africa does do something different, I assure you living standards of all those in Europe and North America and Asia is going to fall.
Well, I'm gonna stop right there for now, because that is some strong statement there. If the West, if Africa make sure that the West stop doing what they're doing right now, but I mean by that is the exploitation. And you earlier were talking about taking your natural resources, taking to Europe or to the West, transforming the natural resources, and then reselling that to you for greater benefits. And then later on, they call you poor. Yeah, when they call you poor. And so how can you be poor and you the one feeding the economy of those great nations? So I'm gonna let you continue on that. This man, does he have a point right here?
I think he hits the nail right on his head. We first have to recognize what's going on here. This started off in colonialism and continued on after colonialism into the world of capitalism. What is going on is, for example, you have gold. You mine your gold, but you're not given the wherewithal to refine your gold or your diamonds. And so now you must sell your gold to get international capital, to get resources that you cannot provide right now in your country. So who sets the price for your gold? Do you? No, you don't set the price. The price for gold is set in London. Well, London doesn't have the gold. So why are they setting the price for your natural resources? Because they want to make sure whatever price they set is well below the price that they will charge you once they have refined your gold. So virtually you're put into a situation where you're guaranteed to lose. But London doesn't just set the price for gold. It sets the price for diamonds. It sets the price for cobalt. It sets the price for every type of natural resources you can find in Africa today, including oil. And so when you look at it that way, you have an unbalanced situation. Because obviously, they can't make jewelry without your gold. And you're the one risking your life going into a hole in the ground, possibly polluting the land around your mine because you're now using acid to purify your gold before you sell it to get a higher price for your gold.
So how do you think this whole process been ongoing for so many years? How do they able to maintain such an I don't know the relationship where you keep telling people, okay, you know what, you're doing the right thing. The African people, you're doing the right thing, and then if you want to kind of help them out about what they're supposed to do, then you see the IMF and the World Bank stepping in with those structural adjustment, whatever they call it.
The first thing you have to ask yourself is who set up the World Bank, who set up the IMF? Okay, it was set up by the European and northern countries, including Canada, United States, and Australia. Now, why did they set up those institutions? to keep the situation the way it was under colonialism. Only what their goal was, they no longer had to occupy a country. All they had to do was control how the money gets spent. And so if they could undervalue your natural resources and have you do the work in gathering the natural resources and then transferring it to them at a very low price, and then they do what is known as the processing of those resources and resell it to the rest of the world at a very high price, then they're always going to have more in the kitty than you are going to have.
What I found very surprising is the World Bank and the IMF are actually here in Washington D.C. area,
Yes.
and for some reasons, when America needs money to borrow money, they go to China. So how come the the World Bank and the IMF only help those countries in the South, as they call it? Why
Yes.
America don't go to the IMF directly downtown DC and borrow money? So that is something I never understood. What is going on here?
First thing we have to look at is this. About 60, 70 years ago, maybe 80 years ago, the United States used to use gold to back up the value of its money. And then they decided, no, we don't need to keep finding access to gold. So they changed the backing of US dollars from gold to silver to bonds. And they said, okay, we'll just sell bonds and then people can buy the bonds and we'll pay them back the bonds with interest. But in today's world, they're not even doing bonds anymore, because what they found was the countries that were willing to buy their bonds the most was China. Because China, after being the place that did all the manufacturing, after the manufacturing factories were moved out of the United States and Europe to China, they ended up having a lot of US dollars that did them no good inside of China. So what they did was they took the US dollar and they came back and they bought US bonds. So the United States very quickly and Europe became very quickly indebted to China. Well, the United States doesn't like that type of position. So what the United States is now doing is they're just printing money. They have nothing to back it up. This is why Biden can talk about $4 trillion, $7 trillion budget to address this problem or that problem or whatever other problem it is. Because the United States no longer tries to find something of value to back up its money. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that if all I'm doing is using a Xerox machine to print money, and I'm passing out the money left and right, the value of that money is going to drop.
Absolutely.
It's one of the things that's led to a lot of people talking about the Bitcoin.
Yes, I was about to come to that point.
And that's how the Bitcoin, yes, that's how the Bitcoin has gained in value. Because people know the Bitcoin is not tied to US dollars.
Yeah. And there's a limited number of Bitcoins that have been created. Yeah.
Right. It's not going through the Federal Reserve. And so people recognize that eventually the game will be up and people will recognize that US dollar is worthless. It was similar to what the German Dutch mark was like leading up to World War II, when they had depression in Germany. That you had people walking around with a wheelbarrow full of money and all they could do was buy a loaf of bread. So again, we need to understand how the system works and recognize there are certain things that we can do to, in fact, to protect the value of our resources that we find in Africa, in the Caribbean, in Central America, in South America, and even in Asia. because as long as we play their game, we're going to lose, and they will stay on top, and they will continue to win.
So basically, the way I see the this phenomenon called cryptocurrencies nowadays, I believe is going to put an end to the central bank, any central bank in any nations in long term, and also that will be the end of baby boomers. We know that period era where people is going to be a new generation of people, new money. Um, we understand that since yesterday to today, even a couple of days ago, there've been some ups and downs, and we might find ourselves in this new bubble, the cryptocurrency bubble. But at the end of the day, I do believe that this new technology called the blockchain is going to put an end to this money machine, the printing of the craziness behind printing money that is totally killing the value of dollar. And also, the most important with this blockchain technology is the fact that this is peer to peer kind of a relationship, financial relationship that putting aside the central bank, the global banking, and all kind of stuff. So my question to you now is that should African nations pay attention to those new, this technology or this new currency or the cryptocurrencies, because one of the debate on the continent right now is about how, especially those 14 countries, African countries, francophone, so-called francophone African, they still have the money, like Gabon still have its money printed in France.
Yes.
So this is a so-called free country, right? They're free, they have independence, but the currency is being printed in another nation.
And valued on the French franc.
Yeah, so what happened is that the French people, they will go and print the money for Gabon and other francophone African, and then they will decide how much. If I print for 1,000 for you, I will decide that you only get 500, and the rest of it, we put aside here in France. So whenever you need it, you can take. But in the meantime, we will pretend that we always come to help you out through some, help or financial help. But actually, they're using your own money.
Correct.
So,
yes, one of the things you have to be clear about what's happening there is that a friend of mine shared with me, a friend of mine from French-speaking Africa, which is the Ivory Coast, which is basically a country considered the darling of France, is that if you looked at the economy of France, at least 70% of every French franc in France is actually wealth coming out of Africa. And so it means basically that if France was not able to exploit the African countries in Africa, that France would be considered by today's definition as a third world country. And you can say the same thing for Great Britain. You can say the same thing for Germany. You can say the same thing for all those different European countries, that they amass their wealth off of what they can rob out of the South, whether it be Africa, the Caribbean, Central America, Asia, South America, or the Caribbean. Right. If you study where their wealth comes from, it comes from the southern hemisphere of the world. And so it shows that there is a solution that we actually have in our own grasp if we choose to follow the right path in addressing the solution.
So you probably, that's wonderful as a development. You still didn't answer that question about crypto. Do you think African nations should take a look at this? Because if we don't have a currency that no longer have to speak to the Federal Reserve, no longer have to deal with banks. And we have a situation in Africa where we still have this tie of printing money in a different country, the country that's supposed to exploit you, print your money, and then decide how that money can be distributed. So do you think the cryptocurrency can be our way out?
My answer to that is no.
Okay.
And why? You can't eat cryptocurrency. You can't wear cryptocurrency. You can't sleep under cryptocurrency. And so basically, cryptocurrency is another way of where the North will control the economy of the rest of the world. Because who's in charge of the cryptocurrency? Is Africa in charge of cryptocurrency? No. So they could at any time turn around and say, okay, we don't believe in the Bitcoin, so we won't accept Bitcoins anymore. So what are you going to do with all your Bitcoins? You know, they got you to go into buying all kinds of Bitcoins, and then they say, we don't accept Bitcoins. So you can't trade on Bitcoins with Europe or the United States or Canada or Australia. So where are you left then? There is a simple solution that we can address. And I hope we will get to talking about the simple solution that we can address. But it means all hands on deck. It means to make that happen, it's going to take the people, not only from the continent of Africa, but the people from the Caribbean, the people from Central America and South America. But it's also going to take the diaspora that lives in Europe, that lives in Canada and the United States to make this happen. You know, and so if we collectively work together and go about it the right way, then we can, again, replace that amputee leg with another leg in which we can stand on and be able to function as a normal human being would be able to function. So what I would say is, no, I won't see the cryptocurrency. This is another invention by Europe and the United States to get people to put their resources in, and yet you'd have no control over it. Africa has no control over cryptocurrency. In fact, we don't even have the access to the computer that the value of cryptocurrency is calculated in.
Well, even if you have access to computer, you still have to use the internet.
I'm talking about their computer program controls the value of cryptocurrency. I'm not talking about to any computer. I'm talking about the specific software that deals with the value of cryptocurrency.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So what happens is, if we aren't dealing with, I mean, food is food. Okay. And what they have done is they have polluted the soil all over Europe, all over the United States. And now they want to come to Africa and do the same thing. And it would be a major mistake for Africa to allow any other part of the world to come and pollute its soil, because the soil has so much importance to do with our health. And so we need to be very, very careful about how we allow these industrial farms to move into Africa.
You know, now they talk around the global warming, and you know, it looks like when it comes to that, when you see who have been doing so many damages to the environment, it's all these northern countries. But it looks like now that Africa is starting to probably to stand up. Now all of a sudden everybody had to participate in stopping the emission in the air. And sometimes those countries that never even have the capacity to have big industries that pollute the air, they have to come and participate in stopping this, you know, madness.
Well, that's often what happens, is that they want to start the race where everybody happens to be located at the time the race gets started. So some of us, say Africa, the Caribbean, Central America, South America, are at the starting line, while others are 50 yards down the track on a 100-yard dash. And they say we need to start right where we are and run to the finish line. Well, wait a minute, you're already 50 yards down the road. So why are you now trying to say that we should start the race without adjusting where people are positioned and starting from their so-called starting line? Obviously, it's an unfair race if one group starting line is 50 yards down the track, while the other group starting line is at the starting line itself, and you're only running a 100-yard race.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I see this brother here, Yan Mutu K the second is absolutely he agree with you. As long as we don't control any currency, it's always good to stay out of it. You stay out of it until you control whatever is going on, so you can have a say. It is absolutely right, and I think he agree with you on that environment issue as well.
But even when you talk about currency basically is a representation of what? Of work and value.
Yeah, and the economy as well.
Right. And so you can have somebody that worked half as much as you do and turn around and tell you the value of their work is 10 times the value of what you're doing. And so
it's insane.
That is not really helping you to deal with a fair approach to value. So again, if we look at how the system is set up, we can then look at ways of how we can collectively work together.
Yeah.
Actually make the system fair. And I'll go in a little bit explaining that. As you well know, I'm a part owner of a chocolate company.
Yeah.
And cocoa can only grow around where you find the equator, because it needs warm climate to grow. And many of the food products that people put in chocolate candy also is grown around the equator. Whether you're talking about passion fruit or coconut or pineapple or whatever, cashews, almonds, this is all grown in the tropical regions of the world. So if you look at something as simple as cocoa, then you really begin to find something quite interesting. If you look at the continent of Africa, just look at just two countries alone, that is Ghana and the Ivory Coast, combined produces over 60% of all the cocoa in the world.
Yeah.
So if you take the cocoa from the other countries inside of Africa, whether you're looking at Nigeria or Gabon or Cameroon or Guinea or Liberia, you would find that in fact Africa produces probably roughly about 70 to 75% of all the cocoa in the world.
Yeah, roughly almost 80%.
But the chocolate industry generates about $135 billion a year.
Mm.
Do you know how much Africa totally receives for its cocoa? And you can't make chocolate without the cocoa. Africa actually receives less than, now, they receive less than $7 billion out of a $135 billion industry.
Mm.
Something's clearly wrong with that.
Completely wrong.
Very wrong. And see, and the point is, that picture can be corrected.
How?
And I'll explain how. Our company, we've been working for about 10 years. And in those 10 years, we have created some of the highest quality chocolate made in the industry worldwide.
Mm.
Now, that's not our opinion. National Geographic's, they actually studied 512 chocolate companies around the world. Out of that 512 chocolate companies around the world, we're talking Nestle, Hershey's, you name it. They came back and said that our company was the only company in the United States that made its top 10 list. So we're in the top 10 out of 512 chocolate companies around the world, as far as the National Geographic is concerned.
Wow.
We didn't stop there. We entered our chocolate in a competition in Great Britain. And they studied 600 companies around the world that made chocolate. Not 512, but 600 companies. And Great Britain came to the conclusion we made the second best chocolate out of 600. So that meant there were 598 other companies that didn't make chocolate as well as we did. Now, that's a powerful weapon.
It is. It is.
Looking at a $135 billion industry. And the fact that cocoa is grown mostly where people of African descent live.
That's a blessing, man.
Africa, the Caribbean, Central America, or South America. It's our communities that grow the cocoa. And
but you know, I read something, so I'm sorry, brother. They were saying that in the years to come, chocolate is gonna be is gonna be so rare, and it's gonna be just like gold today. Chocolate in the future is gonna be gold, and here you're talking about you being in this industry for over the last 10 years. I mean, this is big. I don't know how many nations you've been working with, but I'm so glad you happen to be a Gabonese guy.
Here's the thing. The simple answer is not that Africa now starts taking their cocoa and making confection chocolate and then try to sell confection chocolate to Europe, Canada, United States, Australia, Russia, and China, or whoever. Because those countries have already thought ahead. They have what is called a tariff tax system. Say, if you send in a finished product to their country, they can tax you on that finished product, which will cause your finished product to be way outpriced anything that they're making in their own country. Many of us, now you may be a little younger, but many of us can remember back 25, 30 years ago, to get a Mercedes-Benz, you had to spend $80,000 to $120,000. That was because Mercedes made the car in Germany and then shipped the whole car to the United States. And when they did that, United States put on an import tax that drove the price of Mercedes-Benz close to or over $100,000. So what did Mercedes-Benz do? They
to the United States.
In the United States. They get the parts for the car in Germany.
Absolutely.
Parts over to the United States. And after getting into the United States, they assembled the car inside the United States. And so by doing that, they didn't have to pay the tariffs on their cars. And that the price of their cars dramatically dropped. You notice that the Japanese do the same thing. Even Ford and General Motors, they make a lot of their parts for their cars and trucks in Canada.
Yeah.
But they assemble them in the United States.
Absolutely.
That way they don't have to pay the taxes, the import taxes on their vehicles.
So what do you suggest in when it comes to chocolate? What are your suggestions?
Suggesting in chocolate is simple. Our company is willing to partner up with our brothers and sisters in the continent, where we will train how to make the best chocolate. Countries that produce the cocoa. But what they would do is they would not only grow the cocoa and ferment the cocoa and dry the cocoa in country, but they also will then take that cocoa and make what's called raw chocolate or chocolate bricks in country Just by doing that one step of making the chocolate bricks, they've increased the value of their cocoa by 300 times. Then their company deal with members of the diaspora living in Europe, living in Canada, living in the United States, to set up a plant to make the confection chocolate in Europe. So you ship the raw chocolate or the chocolate bricks to Europe, to your own company in Europe, made up of many people from your own country who already live in Europe, okay, to turn it into confection chocolate. Remember, if they can't get the cocoa from Africa, Nestle can't make chocolate. Hershey can't make chocolate. Cadbury can't make chocolate. Unless they're going to go to somebody's chemistry lab and poison somebody by trying to make some artificial chocolate.
Yeah. And
so what it does, it puts Africa, the Caribbean, Central America, and South America in the driver's seat. Yeah. Now, we have countries like the Dominican Republic or Jamaica who have a large tourist population every year. They can make the confection chocolate at home. And then that confection chocolate, sell it to the tourists when they come there on their vacation. After all, they're looking for something to spend their money on, because usually they buy a complete package that already covers their food, their drinks, their entertainment, and everything else. So they're going to look for something to spend money on. So you sell them your chocolate.
Right.
Okay. But the point is that instead of that $135 billion hemorrhaging out of the South to the North, it actually stays in the control of the South. Now, what do you do with that money? Well, I said, we talked about before, you got gold, you got diamonds. Well, why don't you create some scholarships and train people from your country to learn how to cut diamonds.
There we go.
How to process gold. Excuse me. To learn how to process gold. To learn how to do the technical things with the resources that you already have, whether it's refine your oil or process your gold or cut your diamonds. Okay? And again, set up your own jewelry store in Europe. Because if Europe doesn't have African diamonds, guess what? They don't have diamonds to sell. So you'll be the only one in town that can sell them diamonds or sell those gold rings or whatever they may need. At the same time, now you can also take some of those resources and build yourself a refinery plant for your coltan and for your cobalt. Build yourself a steel mill. Guinea has the largest deposit of iron in the world. And they're selling it for cheap. But if they had a steel mill in Guinea, it not only would create good jobs inside of Guinea, but it would allow Africa to have the ability to set up a whole railroad system throughout the continent of Africa.
You know, in the video, Paul, in the video that you sent, I probably will going to play the second segment. The man was talking about how the West is strategized in a way that they have to keep those raw material cheap. And you earlier you have explained that already, and I think I'm so glad you're coming back to that point where when you said Guinea is selling is raw materials cheap. Isn't it by design that they have to keep it cheap so that they can have it cheap and then resell them to them?
That's why the only people making decisions on raw materials coming out of the South are people living in the North. But again, if you're making the raw materials yourself and processing the raw materials yourself in the South, now you can set your own price, because they will no longer have control over your raw material or your finished product. And so now they would have to accept what you're offering or expose themselves for who they really are. and that is a group of thieves interested in robbing the South of its resources. Because it means then how they're going to make their cars if they have no iron? How are they going to make their jewelry if they have no gold and no diamonds? You know, you don't find this stuff in Europe in large quantities. You don't find it in the United States in large quantities.
What you think about the politics of aid? You hear a lot of aid.
Well, again, aid is
aid here,
yes.
that. Yeah.
Aid is designed to perpetuate indebtedness. They will make an aid loan to you with high interest rates, or they may want to call it low interest rates, but nevertheless. But if you don't have the ability to pay it back because you're not processing the raw materials, you're selling the raw materials at way below market price.
Right.
Then in fact, you're caught into a trap where all you can do is keep borrowing money just to pay off the interest, and the principal stays the same.
Right.
So it is very, very important that we look at how do we work together in Africa, as well as in the Caribbean, in Central America, as well as in Europe.
Yeah.
Because now we can send people to the university and learn how to be good doctors and do the technical surgery that is needed around the world, to be able to do research on medicines and vaccines and whatever, where Africa does not have to see itself in the position it finds itself in today, with their hands out begging for the North to give them vaccines. Okay, while the North is sitting here arguing about whether or not they should even take the vaccine.
But talking about the vaccine, though, surprisingly, some people, I've heard I watched some videos where people in Europe talking about the miracle, the big miracle. How come Africa can be so poor, and yet they have the lowest rate when it comes to COVID infections? And then they go and trying to define and trying to explain. Okay, you know why? It's probably they have more young people. There's young people there. They're going to explain. They have the outdoor life. So many stuff that they explain about this stuff. But yet, you're going to see a president of France, for example, insisting on making sure that all Africans get vaccinated. And earlier, the president of Madagascar came out with his own formula to fight against COVID.
Yes.
His formula works. His people were less affected. He said, "Listen, this is what I'm going to be used." But all hell come loose on him. It was like everybody attacking him from everybody.
You had countries like Senegal, who had a test for COVID that cost $1 per test, $1 per test. Did you find the United States going to Senegal and saying, "Hey, we need to buy 100 million of your tests so we can test our population"? No, they put billions and billions and billions of dollars into the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah.
Okay, and then they told us over here, "Oh, you didn't have to pay for your test; you can get your test for free." Wait. Well, then where did the money come from? It came from our tax dollars, which means then that's less money for education. That means less money for health care. That means less money for affordable housing. That means less money for things we really need. But they want to play the game that because you don't see who's getting paid and where the money's coming from, you're just going to assume that the pharmaceutical companies must be doing this for free. And I dare say, we just went through a pandemic in which you had huge unemployment. In fact, they stated that we had as much unemployment as it was during the depressions in the late 20s and early 30s.
Yeah.
But during that time, the stock market crashed.
It is.
Did you notice our stock market was breaking records during the middle of this pandemic? It kept going up. So somewhere on the line, somebody's getting paid.
Yeah. And President Trump took credit for that too as well.
And obviously, the average person who was not able to go to work didn't have money to put into the stock market. So that
Yeah.
meant the federal government must have been putting a whole lot of money into a lot of corporations' back pockets.
Yeah.
So we need to learn how to connect dots.
Yeah, we need to follow the money at all time. You know, that's what it is. And most of the time it's about the economics. These people here, they, you know, when it comes to pimping the people, they don't care where you here in the United States or in Africa. Everybody get pimping. If you're now with the
Well,
top
everybody, but
1%,
the elite don't get pimping because they're the ones doing the pimping.
listen, they're the one,
They
the
don't
top
get pimped. They're the
1%
ones
on
doing
them.
the pimping.
That's what I'm
Okay.
saying. That's
Yes.
what I'm saying. All the industry belong to them, so they don't care where you live in America or
No.
you live in the South on certain
As
countries.
long as they can make money off of you,
That's it.
you need to also understand one thing. It's important to point out the difference between a show like yours and an MSNBC or CBS or ABC or Fox News is that you're not getting paid billions of dollars by these multinational corporations who are ripping off the world.
Absolutely.
They are. And so
They-
one has to be suspect of the information they get over the television today. Because
Absolutely.
recognize you're not paying the Fox News to give you news. You're not paying to give you news. These large corporations are.
Yeah.
Their goal is to maximize the wealth of the world into their own personal back pockets.
Absolutely.
I was watching a documentary just yesterday that was talking about the whole opioid pandemic that was going on in this country right before the coronavirus.
COVID. Yeah.
And the fact is that Big Pharma, you know, Kaiser, they made huge billions and billions and billions of dollars off of passing drugs that got people ODing all over the world. And what really caught people's attention was they weren't just black people dying from it.
No, this time it was
There
not
was
just
a
black.
lot of white people who got
Yeah.
on those drugs that the doctors were passing out like it was candy.
But there was no such a thing as a war on drug though.
No, but my point is again, so you have a system, you have a government that allowed these people to rob the living daylights out of everyday people and kill them with ODing. And it wasn't just black people ODing. It was a lot of middle class white people dying off of this stuff and getting hooked on it. And the government wouldn't even arrest not even one of the pharmaceutical industry. They said, oh, well, you can pay a fine. And you know what they did after they told them to pay a fine? They allowed them to turn around and sell more drugs to pay for the fine. So, you know, when you have people running around telling you about the Democratic Party or about the Republican Party, let's understand something clear. Those parties get their finance for their political campaigns.
For corporations.
These large multinational corporations.
Absolutely.
You run around talking about how great and happy they are that Joe Biden is the president. Really? Where did Joe Biden get his Secretary of Defense from? He was on the board of Raytheon.
Right.
One of the largest defense contractors with the U.S. military. Now, I bet you 10 to 1, when he leaves this administration, he's going back on the board of Raytheon. So more than likely, he never left the board of Raytheon. He's working for the board of Raytheon right now as he's giving out contracts to Raytheon. Defense contracts to Raytheon.
We've been here 1 hour, you know, it's always endless of information. That's what I told you. People, once you go offline, it's going to be phone calls. Make them and bring them in back on the show. There's so many things we can talk.
Well, may I make a suggestion also? And that is,
go ahead.
I'm on the National Coordinating Committee of the Black Alliance for Peace.
Okay.
And I encourage your people who are watching this show and listening to this show to go to the internet.
Okay.
And actually look for www.blackallianceforpeace.com. There's a wealth of information there. And I think that we really need to, in fact, look at organizations like the Black Alliance for Peace. I'm also a co-founder of Friends of the Congo.
Yeah.
I encourage you to go to that website. That's www.
And support as well. Yeah.
friendsofthecongo.org.
Mm-hmm.
A nonprofit. But again, we recognize the crimes going on in the Congo to enable large corporations to continue to rip off the natural resources in that country. And that the UN itself estimated that from 1996 to 2006, that they killed, not the Congolese, but neighboring countries that the United States supplied the weapons to, killed over 6 million Congolese, in which 3 million of them were children below the age of 5. And
I think that will be an entire. We're gonna have an entire show on that because listen, you have a wealth of
that's
wealth of
US tax
information.
dollars being spent on that.
Yeah.
They didn't have money so that we could send our children to college. They didn't have money for affordable housing, so you got people living out in the streets. But they have money to pay to kill 6 million people in the Congo so they would have easy access to stealing the minerals out of the eastern part of the Congo. So these are the things we need to be aware of, and we need to bring it to an end. And the way we can bring it to the end is what I described earlier, how we can work in partnership.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that folks who are from the continent who moved to Europe need to pick up money back to Africa. There's a role they can play right there in Europe. There's a role they can play in Canada. There's a role they can play right in the United States in changing the dynamics of stopping the exploitation and the robbing of the natural resources of Africa.
Absolutely. Listen, it sounds to me like a conclusion, and because hey, listen, I can tell you guys, Brother Paul can go on and on, and this is not there's no shortage of information here, and the more you talk, the more inspired you become, and I can tell you, you got to come back to listen to this brother. I think next time we'll take on the Congo and the exploitation of the Congo, the raw materials, the corporation, all kind of stuff, the killing. You talk about 6 million of Congolese. That's more than the Holocaust in Germany.
And that was only up from 96 to 2006. The killing is still going on.
Absolutely.
So you can probably look at that number being double by now.
Oh, yeah. Triple.
As they continue to rob the natural resources out of the Congo.
That's absolutely correct. Listen, brother, maybe something else you can say to conclude this wonderful, wonderful presentation today.
Well, people may ask how to get a hold of me.
Yeah.
And I will give an email address.
Okay.
Paul, Paul.
Okay. I'm going to put it on the screen. So Paul, and then?
Paul at friends, with an S on the end of friend, friendsofthecongo.org. Drop me a note. Go to our website, and and just try to make yourself familiar with what we have on our website and talking about what's happening in the Congo.
Absolutely.
That's against humanity, and yet our media does not talk about it at all.
Yeah. So you can see on the screen here as Paul at friendsofcongo.org. You can see it on the screen. Well, listen, my brother, it's been almost 1 hour and 13 minutes. It looks like we've been here for just 1 minute. Just to tell you that I can swallow everything you say for days. And for people still don't know you. Hey, listen, if you don't want to know more, you have to come back here. This is where this guy gonna give you the most important information that you will never see on the CNN. Like this brother will say, brother Mutu will say, this is not the Gen TV is not CNN. It's not all the BBC kind of stuff. This is a place where you can come and talk without fear, because we don't get corporation money, and that's the only way we can stay free and continue to educate our people. Brother Paul, what a pleasure, man. What a pleasure
Well,
to
thank
have
you
you
for giving
tonight.
me the opportunity to share. And again, I encourage you to go to two websites, the Black Alliance for Peace.com and friendsofthecongo.org. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And ladies and gentlemen, that is actually conclude our show for today. We'll look forward to speak with you and to give you more information in days to come. Thank you so much for watching.